Okay, when you think about the 80s box office, it's pretty much the Spielberg and Lucas show. If I asked you to guess the top movies each year, you'd probably get most of them right away. But here's what I thought was interesting. We looked not only at the #1 films, but also at the second and third place movies each year. And trust me, some of these battles were way closer and way weirder than you'd expect. Let's check it out. Tell me how many of these you actually saw in theaters. Empire Strikes Back's budget was about $18 million, and it ended up making around $538 million worldwide. The next two movies behind it were 9 to 5 and Stir Crazy. George Lucas funded Empire himself. After Star Wars, he didn't want Fox to control the sequel, so he put up over $30 million of his own money, basically betting everything he had. Costs exploded so much that at one point Bank of America froze his credit. He fired his original producer halfway through and had to film under a fake title just to avoid trouble with the Directors Guild. He was feuding with them at the time. When Empire first opened, a lot of people didn't get it. Critics called it too dark, too confusing, nothing like the original. It wasn't even the top movie every weekend in the US, but overseas and through re-releases, it ended up beating everything. Those other two films, 9 to 5 and Stir Crazy, did great in America, but outside the US earned nothing. Empire made triple their numbers globally. And Lucas's gamble really paid off, because he kept all the merchandising rights. Just by 1981, the toys alone made more money than the actual film. Budget was $20 million, made around $389 million. Next closest movies were For Your Eyes Only and Superman 2. Here's what's crazy though, nobody wanted to make Raiders. Spielberg and Lucas had rough patches after Empire and Spielberg's 1941. Every studio passed until Paramount said yes, but only if Spielberg made it under 85 days and on budget. He got it done in just 73 days. When it came out, it didn't even have a huge opening weekend, but word of mouth kicked in and it kept growing week after week. Superman 2 and For Your Eyes Only were sequels from massive franchises, but Raiders, a totally new character and idea, ended up grinding past them just by sticking around forever. Critics said it felt old-fashioned, but people loved it. It ended up being the biggest movie worldwide in '81, and Spielberg finally showed studios he could deliver without blowing the budget. Budget about $10 million, made a whopping $792 million. Second and third places were Rocky III and Tootsie. Big hits, but nowhere near Extra-Terrestrial. This wasn't just a hit. It became the highest-grossing film of all time until Jurassic Park, and Spielberg personally screened it at the White House. Reagan said, "You know, there are people in our government who believe that's not fiction." E.T. himself was inspired by three things: Albert Einstein, a pug, and a newborn baby. Spielberg made sure the movie was shot in order, scene by scene, so the kids would bond with the puppet naturally. Drew Barrymore thought E.T. was real and freaked out on set when she saw him dying. $32.5 million budget, pulled in $475 million. Next in line, Flashdance and Octopussy. Jedi was guaranteed money, but behind the scenes it was pretty chaotic. Lucas originally wanted Spielberg to direct, but Spielberg wouldn't cross the Directors Guild picket line Lucas had created after Empire. So Lucas got this British director, Richard Marquand, then basically took over directing himself anyway. Harrison Ford famously wanted Han Solo to die, but Lucas said no way, he still had toys to sell. And Jedi's release got delayed half a year just to line up with Kenner's new action figure line. Seriously. They even gave the production a fake name, Blue Harvest, so vendors wouldn't gouge their prices knowing it was a Star Wars film. Flashdance came out of nowhere with that soundtrack everyone loved, and Octopussy was caught up in a James Bond showdown with Never Say Never Again. But Jedi crushed both of them, purely because everyone knew it was the final Star Wars film, at least back then, and Lucas had the toy marketing down to a science. $28 million budget, ended up with about $333 million. Next closest films, Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters. Temple of Doom went darker than Raiders, child slavery, black magic, human sacrifice. So much so, it literally forced the MPAA to invent the PG-13 rating. Parents freaked out, but that just made kids want to see it even more. Paramount smartly opened Temple of Doom 3 weeks before Ghostbusters and a full month before Beverly Hills Cop. That head start, especially overseas, let indie build a huge lead. Ghostbusters held on longer in the US, but globally, Temple of Doom just got there first and stayed ahead. Spielberg later called it his least favorite indie film, but that didn't stop it from winning the global box office that year. Everybody loves Back to the Future, but making it was an absolute mess. At first, they cast Eric Stoltz as Marty, shot for 5 weeks, and realized it wasn't working. He wasn't funny, wasn't clicking, so they fired him, brought in Michael J. Fox, and had to reshoot half the movie. Fox was filming Family Ties during the day, so they shot at night. Universal gave them exactly 9 weeks after filming to finish the whole thing, editing, effects, everything, to hit their July 3rd release. At the box office, this thing was huge. Stallone had 2 giant hits in '85, Rambo 2 and Rocky 4, each pulled in over $300 million. But Back to the Future outlasted them both. It held the #1 spot for 11 weeks straight. Universal timed its international release perfectly, opening before Stallone's movies hit overseas. As a result, it beat the year's 2 biggest action sequels, and it did it by getting everybody, adults, teens, kids, in the theater at the same time. First real global teen blockbuster. Here's one Paramount marketed as pure action but quietly kept away from war themes or politics. Smart move. They partnered with the US Navy, who loaned them real F-14 Tomcats, carriers, even Miramar Air Station. But the Navy got final say on the script and actually cut stuff out. After the film opened, Navy enlistment jumped by something like 500%. They shot the dogfights practically, no CGI. Director Tony Scott even got kicked off an aircraft carrier because he delayed takeoffs trying to film a perfect sunset. Had to pay $25,000 out of his own pocket just to get 10 more minutes. Box office-wise, it got beat in America by Crocodile Dundee for a few weeks. But internationally, Top Gun dominated because the Pentagon promoted it everywhere as a recruitment tool. It opened early May and stayed in theaters for over 8 months. Aliens was huge too that year, but came out late summer, more niche sci-fi. Paramount knew exactly what they were doing. Fatal Attraction, probably the craziest hit on this list. Originally, Glenn Close's character was supposed to take her own life and frame Michael Douglas for murder. They shot it, tested it, audiences hated it. Paramount forced a new ending. They reshot the now famous bathtub shooting just weeks before release. Glenn Close hated the new ending, called it a betrayal, but eventually gave in. They marketed it as a thriller, but surprisingly, more than 60% of opening weekend tickets were bought by women, became this massive cultural phenomenon. It went head-to-head against Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Dirty Dancing, both huge hits. But Fatal Attraction went beyond hit. It became an obsession. No action, no big soundtrack push, just pure word of mouth. Opened in September against awards season prestige films, and it stayed in the top 10 for 18 weeks straight. Huge deal for a movie made for just $14 million. Rain Man had a wild journey too. Originally, Dustin Hoffman wasn't even playing Raymond. He was set for the Tom Cruise role. Script got rewritten multiple times over 6 years, passed through directors like Martin Brest, who quit, and Spielberg, who left to make Empire of the Sun. Sidney Pollack said no too. Barry Levinson finally took it, but had just 2 weeks prep before shooting started. At the Oscars, Rain Man cleaned up. Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Screenplay. First film since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to do that. Roger Rabbit and Coming to America were massive hits that year at the box office, but Rain Man beat them both by targeting adults, riding Oscar hype, and staying in the top 5 for 11 weeks straight. By home video release, it was already the biggest grossing Best Picture ever. By 1989, Spielberg only agreed to direct Indiana Jones again after Lucas promised it'd be lighter than Temple of Doom. Ford did almost all his own stunts, even the tank scenes, and hurt his knee jumping between tank treads. That entire tank chase was shot in Spain with a real 28-ton World War I tank modified to look German. Batman opened bigger in the US, and Back to the Future. Part 2 had more hype. But internationally, Last Crusade crushed both of them. Warner limited Batman overseas to fight piracy. Universal held Back to the Future Part 2 back in some markets till Christmas. Paramount dropped Indy early May, all summer to dominate overseas. Sean Connery and Harrison Ford together pulled back everyone who hated Temple of Doom. Smartest move ever.